Hello and welcome to the Seercast. We're starting a new series today. The tentative title is Stories Behind the Sword, but all of these other
Lime dies in.
all of these other noobs don't like it. So, what we're here today is in the background you'll see some footage of us bossing at Next, and we're going to be discussing the lore of the God Wars dungeon. With me today is Runic.
Who lives in an orange under the sea?
Lime, you have to answer that.
I don't know how to answer that. We've also got Orange, who I guess does live in an orange under the sea.
I guess that would make sense.
But then again, he might just be the orange under the sea.
Oh dear.
So we've also got Fang.
Hi. I don't live in an orange under the sea.
And
Good.
Walter,
Yet.
of course, as always, is in the chat.
He lives on a moon, not under the sea.
So, before we get sued for copyright infringement, we are going to be discussing the lore of the God Wars dungeon. And hopefully, this will be a relatively short cast, only about 30 minutes, but maybe it'll be entertaining. It's another one of those testing the waters to see how it fits.
Maybe, excuse me, this will be insanely entertaining.
Yeah, if this dialogue isn't entertaining, then you might as well just mute it and watch me die, and die again.
Which is what we're really all here for.
Yeah.
Yes, this is just like the background music. So let's get into the lore of it itself. We're going to be talking about the God Wars dungeon, otherwise known as the Temple of the Lost Ancients. It was created a long time ago as the Temple.
Far away.
No. I walked right into that.
Yes, you did.
Its original name was the Temple of the Lost Ancients. And correct me if I'm wrong, but my lore on this is a little bit rusty, but it was a temple in the Second Age, and they were fighting,
No,
Next.
actually. It was an ancient temple, but we don't know what its source was. However, at the very beginning of the God Wars, Nex was imprisoned in there by a group of Ceredomanists who then called it the Temple of the Lost Ancients and built the temple that we see today around
so that's that.
it. Yes.
It was perhaps a temple at first, but then it became a frozen prison for Nex, who was, as we know, an infernal creation of Zeros, which scared the hell out of all the other gods.
Yeah, I have no idea what she was.
And as Walter says, they built a temple on top of the temple.
Yeah, we don't really have any information about what sort of temple was there, if there was really a proper temple there, or if it was just a giant cave with some random scratchings. But after they imprisoned Nex, they named it the Temple of the Lost Ancients. They believed it was completely secure, and yeah.
And to be honest, it was for several millennia.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was pretty good construction. They are pretty good.
Until, of course, an Armadillian army carrying the God Sword retreated into the temple.
Yep. After
was-
Zami got super powerful, Zeradomin, Bandos, and Armadil teamed up. Armadillians forged the God Sword, which was supposed to be able to slay a god. Thus, the Armadillians went flying.
Yes, the Armadillians had to retreat away from the Zamorakians, and they retreated into the Temple of Lost Ancients in a very bad strategic move.
Yes. Hey guys,
Yes.
we're trying to escape the Zamorakians. Let's go into this cave with no discernible way out. Aye, aye,
When we have
Captain.
wings.
Yeah, when they have wings. I mean, so did many of the Zamorakians, but still.
But still, it's kind of going against their strategic abilities.
We're
If
birds.
they-
Let's go into a dark cave.
Yes, let's just restrict our flying space.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, let's
Now-
just nerf ourselves so we have a fair fight.
While we're joking about this,
Like-
the actual reason they went in there was they were caught and overpowered by Zamorakian forces. They were trying to escape, and the Zamorakians were not only faster but stronger, killed a number of them, and they ambushed them. The remainders. This happened up in the Trollways Mountains. Well, mountain, but it's mountains. And
Yeah,
they attempted to capture the sword, but the Aviancy were able to fight off the Zamorakians, and that's how they found the temple and kind of gave themselves room to regroup and continue assault while sending out, a distress call to the Ceredominists and Vandosians.
So eventually the help did come, and it was under the form of 2 other generals. And all those armies, they all converged in this temple, or this old temple that nobody was using anymore. Some things happened, and eventually this was what was supposed to be 3-on-1 turned into a gigantic anything goes free for all.
What's especially interesting about this is after the Ceredominists, headed by Commander Ziliana, and the Vandosians, headed by General Grardor, arrived, tensions just started rising because they're all cooped up in this cave. They've each taken a fortress for themselves, and the Armadillions are hoarding the Godsword, basically. The Vandosians and the Ceredominists want to crush the puny Zamorakians and get out of there with the sword. But something was going wrong, and the Armadillions were not trusting their supposed allies.
I can't remember. Do we have a reason as to why they weren't trusting their supposed allies, or is it just like...
So, my specific theory, actually, is Slisky.
Well, that makes sense. What about Igor?
Now, the reason for this isn't quite so random, though, because Slisky went in there, screwed with Ashelot Rays, released Nex, got Nex to be, awoken.
Well, that happened a little bit. That happened a little bit later.
We actually don't know when that happens.
Oh, we do. We know it was after they'd all turned on each other.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it happened a little bit later. He'd have to mess around with the general's thought process a little bit, so they all turn on each other.
Correct. But then following that awakening of Nex, all of them actually had to group together again in order to shut her down.
Including the Zamorakians.
But once they did, they kind of stupidly went back to fighting again.
Well, I mean, there was still the Godsword to fight for.
Exactly, but it was kind of a, look, we just teamed up together, took out Nexipoo, now what?
I mean, it could
Let's
have been
go back to hitting each other.
Yeah.
But it wasn't.
Another thing that we know is that the Ceredominists stole the Armadillian crossbows.
Yes.
And then additionally, another thing we're going to talk about is those necklaces.
There was a surprising amount of subterfuge around all the this entire battle right here, especially from the Ceredominists, which kind of makes sense because one of the largest spy
organizations
in Gielinor is the Temple Knights, and everything associated with them. So it makes sense for the Ceredominists to be very good at subterfuge. Alright, so eventually, after they put down Nex and they all turn on each other, the entire God Wars dungeon freezes over. Like, the whole thing freezes.
Yeah, Gothics froze it over.
Oh.
Yeah, basically, a mage named Adrenam cast a powerful freezing spell on the temple. Gothixian forces were sent in basically to kind of distract them. They got out, and this mage was able to cast this insanely powerful spell. That didn't freeze for a very long time.
But then it's eventually revealed that the Gothixians didn't get out, and we finally have our Gothics Godsword.
Fun fact, Adrenam in Latin means eternal.
Gothics Godsword confirmed?
No, more of a, the spell was supposed to last forever.
Yes, but eventually tectonic activity, the 5th Age, which I don't really buy. Tectonic activity in the 5th Age caused the God Wars dungeon to unfreeze and the fighting to resume because everyone inside was completely oblivious to the fact that the God Wars ended millennia before.
Yes, Walter is completely correct there. They blamed global warming due to adventurers training their fire-making skill.
Yeah, I honestly don't buy that.
It is my favorite explanation for something opening up. Like, Mauritania has some weird stuff, like, oh, the waters have miraculously drained, so you can go deeper into this one. This one was, too many people have trained fire-making, so this shit melted. Pardon my French.
And thus you have the biggest PVM update in history.
Yeah, probably the
Yeah.
biggest and most historic PVM
Yep.
update in history.
Most
I don't
iconic.
think a single PVM update will ever match the scale of the God Wars Dungeon and the changes that it made to the game's meta.
Yeah.
I mean,
Boss.
they
It never.
tried. They absolutely tried with Virago, but this, the God Wars Dungeon,
This
the fact
was
that they're still
4 new
asking,
bosses,
As a
2 new
PVM,
armor sets.
the fact that they're still asking for another God Sword and another like continual update to the God Wars Dungeon shows how momentous this was to the game and the game's
Yeah.
lore.
It's huge. And the God Swords really became some of the figure
They are
items
just
for this game.
iconic.
As a PVMer, as a PVMer, I'll say that basically, while other bosses have revolutionized PVM as a whole since GWD, mainly Virago and then raids, but nothing has quite changed. No boss has quite changed the entire game like GWD.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's just that it was the start of the big PVM craze, in my opinion. Is that correct?
It
Yeah,
did a
that's
lot
pretty
to
good.
shift away from PvP and all that. And this was really the big chance for players to now fight a series of bosses with series of mobs leading up to it. It felt like a raid at the time because you had to go and battle these trash mobs before you could go in there and fight. You know,
Exactly.
at the time it was not easy to get there. They had high level requirements.
It was tough as nails
Yeah.
with the
Yeah. 60 strength or 60 agility to get in, and then
Yeah.
70 to get to the bosses, and then you had to kill a bunch of monsters, and then you had to fight the boss that had, ads as well. This was really RuneScape's first raids per se. It was huge.
It was a predecessor.
Yeah, very much.
But before we keep going praising it, but this is something really praiseworthy. Let's talk about the individual bosses. We have split up the bosses between us so that we're not like all out of breath at the very end. So let's go straight into probably currently the toughest boss in the God Wars dungeon, which it's not really saying much, but it is the toughest and probably like the one that everyone is so insane about. Nex. And
Which
I
is
mean,
also
of
the
course-
last boss added to the God Wars dungeon.
yes, it was added. I almost said posthumously, but it was
Yeah,
added.
The whole thing died.
It was added after all the other ones by several years. What was it? 2000.
2011, I believe.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
I think 2011.
It's
Fun
about,
fact as well, her original combat level and now what her current combat level is, 1001, is a reference to when she was released, January 1st.
Yep.
So Runic wanted to talk about Nex and the lore regarding Nex, as well as what we learned in the lore book drop from Nex. How many Nexus am I gonna say? Nexus followers.
16,
Yeah.
16 Nexus. Or January 10th, by the way.
So Runic, it's all yours.
Alright, so I guess I'll just start with the basics. Nex was a Nihil, one of Zaros's experiments from Frenescae. And what happened was Zaros, essentially after deeming the Nihil a failure, noticed that one of them caught his attention.
And of course the Nihil or Nihil, they were a combination species. Zeros's attempt to create life.
Yeah. Anyhow. So what happened was, Zaros essentially implanted a shard of Zaros, a little sliver of himself, into Nex. Fang probably should say phrasing here.
I just wasn't sure if I should say it out loud.
Anyway,
Are we still doing phrasing?
yes, we are. We're making it a thing on Seercast. Anyhow, back to the point. So, Zaros upgraded Nex. I don't know how else to put it.
He
He experimented on Nex.
sentientized, I guess.
Yes,
Hey,
He
made
evolved
her-
her to the
he made
next
her-
There we go.
Yeah.
That's a good way.
Yes, he evolved her into the next stage. Pun
Oh!
intended.
Ah! Ah!
Anyhow,
Oh,
the
God.
the newly intelligent Nex gave herself the name Nex from the demon language. And what does Nex mean in Latin again? Death or murder.
Yeah, that's probably something like that.
Essentially, she chose a really awesome name.
Means death
Like-
or the procurer thereof.
Yeah. Next, like any person who plays RPGs, chose a totally awesome name.
And then, of
we
course,
have
chose
Nex.
followers with equally awesome names.
Yes.
Are we referring to her four mages or
Yes.
Torva?
For
Yes, I'm
Vernix.
getting to them. Anyhow, so then Nex came to the Gielinor basically towards the end of the Second Age. If I can't remember the exact timeline at this moment, but basically Nex wasn't on Gielinor for long before Zaros fell.
Yes, she was probably in there since the late Second Age.
Yeah, and I think she had a palace
Yes, she did.
somewhere.
Yep.
She had one in Sinestian, I think.
Yeah, according to what I'm reading here, following Zaros' downfall in the Second Age, Zerosians were working to secure the area around the Majora ritual site, and the leader of that was Nex. She
Yeah.
gained power as she killed and killed and killed. And that's when she came into conflict with the Ceredominists, and they managed to imprison her.
Yes. And they imprisoned her in the Temple of Lost Ancients. Eventually, what happened was the God Wars dungeon, the battle for the God Sword happened. Thus, and this somehow woke up Nex from her prison. She broke out and started basically wrecking shop.
Well, she broke out because of Slisky. Yes.
Yes.
Well, no, I thought the second time she broke out because of Slisky.
No. Yeah. So, the only time she broke out was because of Slisky manipulating Ashalot Race and others.
Oh, yeah. I keep thinking it's...
She
yeah,
was imprisoned
my bad.
initially by Ceredominists, and broke out due to Ashalot Race
Yes.
manipulation.
So, alright, let me tell that. I'm completely confusing my timeline here. Anyhow, so what happened was... 1 second.
You
Yes.
want me to hit this?
Yeah, you hit this.
Go
Okay,
ahead.
So,
Yelling at me.
during this time, the Ceredominist priests who were supposed to be guarding this prison, and they were deep down inside of it as well, so they're not involved in this conflict above. They were approached by a mysterious figure who was talking about Guthix, and he told them basically that Guthix was the only god who would be able to stop all of this, he'd end the war, and these priests actually abandoned the cause of Ceredomin and became followers of Guthix because they were so convinced. Their mysterious leader then showed them how to become druids, thus nature spirits, and these priests and the leader performed said ritual, but didn't wake up Guthix. It opened the prison, releasing Nex, and the leader was revealed to be Slisky, who at the time was a loyal Zerosian Majora.
The intention
Left.
probably was to unleash Nex into the world, the main world, in order to, like, wreak havoc.
Absolute full strength. Potentially even wake up Guthix, but I don't really think Slisky cared about that. I think he was just more interested in seeing what happened with the race.
I actually think that it was kind of part of a plan to unleash Azanadra,
What's a thought?
and like if he was actually loyal, then it could have led to the actual return of Zeros.
Very true. But at the time, though, unfortunately, all four factions came together, re-imprisoned her, and
Against
And-
all odds.
Yes.
and they created a frozen door and scattered the four pieces to each of the factions.
In like a
Yes.
total Coca-Cola secret formula type way.
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much.
So each faction only had one piece, and that way none of the other factions could ever reopen this again.
Yeah, the threat of Nex was neutralized, but
Eventually, in the fifth age...
Us scrubs open that up.
Yes.
Yeah.
Screw things
Because we
over
just-
again.
Good,
Yeah,
good on us.
Yay! We
Because
steal the
that's our
4
job.
key pieces.
Yeah, so we steal the 4 key pieces, unlock the door, and go in and try to solo this thing.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah, so, after Nex was pretty much locked away, and then we reawaken her, she's pretty much able to move around, kind of escape. She's not at full power, however.
I don't think... Well, actually, apparently, from Dialogue in the World Wake, Sliske actually had to let her out of the God Wars dungeon still.
Yes. He specifically went to her and got her out. And after
But
she wreaked some wonderful havoc, Seerdomen did send her back.
But yes, as then shown in Fable of the Gods, she can now leave whenever she wants.
Thanks, Sliske.
So she's slowly regaining her power,
Exactly.
which is a terrifying thing.
Luckily, Zeros is about to keep her under control at this point.
Yeah.
Yes.
Less worrisome, I suppose.
Well, to me,
Yes.
it's more worrisome, but
Next has been by
One thing I
Zeros.
will mention with the return of Zeros, though, is it's very possible that Zeros just pulled her out.
yes.
Hey,
That is a very real possibility. So,
Especially considering it's...
shall we move on to other bosses?
yes!
Okay,
Because,
so,
Nexus story is pretty much
here is another one of... Well, they're all pretty iconic, but this is Seerdomen's general, Commander Zilliana. And, she is pretty ruthless, in my, she's very devout, she's very ruthless, and I'm going to let...
She's even known as Saint Zilliana in some circles.
Yes. Well, she was very crucial to the success of the God Wars. She was a very successful commander.
Yeah.
yeah.
So she has that going for her. She's also a colossal bitch, but...
And she's voiced by Modana. Well, ex-Modana.
I'm gonna let Runic and Fang once again take it away.
Alright.
So, for Commander Zilliana, and the lore book that she drops, which is Zilliana's Notes.
Yes, Zilliana's Notes. That's my personal favorite lore book of the bunch.
It's a good one.
Yeah, it is.
Alright, so let's just start out with who Zilliana is, and where did she come from?
Zilliana is one of the last known Icene, at least on Gielinor. Yeah, that's...
Yes.
She's an Icene. Fang, did she come from Hallowvale, or was she shipped over from New Domina? I can't remember that.
I believe she was shipped over specifically from New Domina as a leader of Icene battle forces during the God Wars. It's very possible that she spent some time in Hollowvale, but no sources really seem to support that.
Yeah.
During her time as a commander, she was basically a leader of both Icene and Seerdomenist and general forces during the God Wars, and she played a huge part in rallying troops, creating huge tactical victories, and general large parts of invasions.
Including, I believe it was the Battle of Anakara.
Correct.
Yeah. Yeah, as pictured in Ritual Najrat.
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah,
In
she-
fact, this is probably one of the most important things as it ties to the Stone of Jas.
She met her untimely end once.
At the hand of Krill Sutzeroth, who we'll talk about later, she was either exceedingly injured or killed, and Seerdomen brought her to the Stone of Jas and healed her or returned her to life,
Yeah.
which I personally believe is a big reason why she's called Saint Zilliana. She's this legendary figure that was brought back from the grave by Seerdomen himself to continue to lead his forces. It's very big for her as a rallying
Seerdomen's
point.
true for commander.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Yes, that's actually pretty good.
She also had a very direct line to Seerdomen. He would specifically give her instructions during her time in the Temple of Lost Ancients, and she would.
And to be
Yeah.
honest,
She would work with.
This is where we... Yes, this
she
is where
got
we...
she probably got specific instructions after she became a very successful commander.
Oh, absolutely.
And this is where we go into Zilliana's notes.
Yeah, Zilliana being in the God Wars dungeon.
Yeah.
She's the one who explicitly criticizes the Armadillians for going into the God Wars dungeon, the dungeon area.
She specifically says, on the surface they had a chance of outmaneuvering Pearl's forces by making full use of their wings, but no, they've chosen to cower underground. There's no hope of escape. Trapped, like caged birds. And then she gets cocky.
She's pretty strategic.
Yeah. Which, I mean, is always shown in her actions.
Yeah, she is a commander.
Yeah, exactly. Go ahead and hit on the lore book if you want, Runic. I have it open in front of me as well.
Yeah, I have it open too. Alright,
So it gives you a,
it starts off by giving you an idea of what it was like for Ziliana. Her opinion, she talks about how Bandos and all of the other, the forces started moving in and setting up their own bases in the God Wars dungeon. The Temple of Lost Angels, like they call it, God Wars dungeon. And eventually she gets basically fed up with everything, and
especially after General Grador
arrives and he's a bit of an idiot.
Arrives and
he's a
attacks.
Yes, Grador is very known for his intelligence.
So at this point, actually, Grador attempts to lead a small band into the Eyrie. Instead of trying to fight the Zamorakians, he goes to try and steal the God's Sword. So this is actually the big sparking point as to why the four separated and it became all-out war. Grador did a stupid.
Well, to be honest, he was probably acting under instructions from Bandos.
Oh yeah, and he still did a stupid. I actually like how she calls him the drunken oaf, Grador.
Grador smashed table and also door.
Yeah, he is the biggest supporter of EOD.
Yes, he is. The true hero.
In any case, Ziliana calls Grador an idiot and then proceeds to do the exact same thing that he did.
Yeah.
And,
I'd also like to make a very funny note. I believe, I'm checking this because I might be wrong, but I believe that the three helpers of Grador actually drop beers and kebabs.
They do.
They do.
They do. Yeah, so that further supports the drunken thing, which I thought was particularly funny.
Well, I mean, what's a Bandosian without mead?
Yeah, that's true.
Exactly.
Yes, Sergeant Steelwheel specifically drops the beer very commonly.
In any event, after Grador attacks and also Ziliana attacks, they all barricade themselves within their encampments.
They're heavily beaten up.
Yes. She goes and prays to Saradomin, and when she wakes up, there are 3 amulets.
Each bearing a symbol of one of the other gods.
Yes.
Yes,
She questions a little bit.
She actually believes that it's somebody trying to play a trick on her, but she moves them, and when she wakes, they were there again.
Yeah.
Yes.
So she asks her 3 lieutenants, Bree, Growler, and Starlight, to wear them. Each one wears the one that's, their combat style. But she's very confused as to why they have these other gods' symbols on them and why she would want to give them to them. And more and more and more amulets start appearing each day. And then here's where she figures out what's happening a couple days later. Bree goes out wearing one of the amulets, and she was able to hear everything that was happening that Bree could hear with the amulet directly to herself. She knew exactly what was happening, and he could also hear her. He says to her directly, he said that he felt like I was calling for him.
Exactly, and this is like this is where all the subterfuge takes place.
Yep. She specifically describes it as, the amulets give me power to listen to the bearer, and although I can scarcely believe it, it's like I can sow the seed of a thought in the wearer's mind. It's only a subtle influence, nothing more than a whisper, a murmur, or a hiss. Haha, the name drops. but there it is.
Oh, those puns.
Yeah.
And of course, Saradomin, in his intelligence, which it just shows that he, well, in any case, he made it so
Hashtag
that
stop Serotonin.
he made it.
Sorry, I had to throw that in there.
Thank you. Thank you.
He made it so that the other generals would want to wear these, amulets, so that they'll be able to, so that they could spy on them. And of course, Ziliana is able to take effect with this, so that she can actually ambush all the other gods. And I like to think that if the God Wars dungeon continued without being frozen, it would be very likely that the Saradominus would have won, because that's just such a strategic advantage that Ziliana has.
Yes. It's worth noting that after she gave them to them, eventually, and this isn't put in the journal, but eventually they did discover that the amulets were, spying tools.
Yes. Alright. So moving right along. We are a bit late, but that's what we do here at Seercast. We've
Luckily,
got
Zilly's probably the longest one.
Yeah, Zilly is probably the longest winded and the more intensive one.
Yep.
So now
Yes.
we're moving over to Krill Sutsar, and Fang wants to take over this and his
right.
book, which is Rasola's account. Wait, no.
Razale's
Razale's-
Tale.
Razulai's Tale, yes.
So here is a brief history of Bill Sutsaroff, the butthead. Basically, he's huge and annoying and loud and, well,
He's also the arch nemesis of Ziliana.
indeed. I mean, he killed her, or insanely heavily, weakened her. So Krill Sutsaroth is a member of the, shockingly, Sutsaroth tribe of demons. He has the title Sutsaroth because he was the leader of this tribe. They're known as the Elders of the Butchers, and they ruled several smaller tribes. According to some additional information, Krill was actually summoned by Bilrak, the Majorat, initially, and that was how he arrived on Gielinor. Krill led a lot of the battles as well for Zamorak, of course. He's a giant demon, insanely powerful, similar in strength and stature to the Calgarian leaders.
Yes. He is a
and,
very powerful demon, very
yes.
Physically strong as well.
Yep. And as we learn from Razalei's tale, Razalei is a demon who creates armors and various magical enchantments. He has 12 hands, which makes him a particularly skilled craftsman. Razalei's tale is written directly from Razalei's point of view, and he talks about how he created the robes of subjugation, which were actually a new drop added when these books were released back in 2012.
Yes.
Razalei notes that Zamorak seems particularly worried since he had just betrayed Zamorak, and these robes were infused with... Or he had just...
You mean that
Yeah, he
Zamorak
had just
is
betrayed...
particularly worried because
he had just betrayed Zeros. Sorry.
Yes.
On God there. But Razalei began working on these robes, and he infused them with cruelty. Years later, a demon returned to the infernal dimensions, and he told Razalei that Zamorak had bestowed the robes on the mages of his inner circle. They were presented as a really great gift. And the powers were... they drew powers for the robes, but they did it to overthrow their god, and pain hooked into their flesh, and they desperately tried to draw more power, but the pain only increased and increased and increased and increased. So Zamorak's design of these was pretty much, look, you're working for me or you're going to be in immense pain.
Yes.
It was very interesting design on that. Unfortunately, Razalei's tale doesn't give us a lot of information about Krill Sutsaroth, which is a little unfortunate, but it's more about this new drop that was added, so I suppose
Correct.
it makes sense.
Yeah.
So now let's get into Krill Sutsaroth himself.
So he himself, as we mentioned, a powerful tactical demon, brute strength and intense magical skill, and one of his combat abilities is the ability to punch through prayers, which he displays
Also
even
poison.
through Ziliana. He can poison. There's not really a ton of backstory about him specifically, which is a little upsetting, but whatever.
It's suspected that he was basically the Zamorakian version of Ziliana.
Yes. Now, what we do know is that he used to rule the city Dis on Infernus in Zamorak's name, but
He
after
used to rule the city.
he ruled this city on rock and roll.
I was about to say that.
But now here's the big thing though: is after the God Wars dungeon was frozen, Grigar, another Sutzeroth demon, began calling himself Grigar Sutzeroth, as he is an insanely powerful demon as well. But that Sutzeroth title is only supposed to be given to the leader. So Grigar basically believed Krill was dead, began to rule Dis in Krill's absence, and Krill was frozen for a very long time. It appears that Krill has not returned to Infernus since the God Wars dungeon unfroze, or if he has, Grigar is not willing to give up his leadership of Dis, or maybe Krill doesn't want it, but he continues to go by Krill Sutzeroth regardless. Krill appears in the World Wakes as part of the Zamorakian faction, trying to kill Gothics.
Walter wishes to note that the descriptions of Krill Sutzeroth's lieutenants are actually very, very good.
Very, yes. It gives us a lot of lore about how parts of the God Wars went down, especially related to the desert, right?
Specifically, the lieutenant named Balfrog Kriav. And
Yes.
his description text states that he's the spoiler of Ulek, which was basically the capital of the desert. And it gives you the idea that Ulek was destroyed by Zamorakian forces after an invasion, which we know.
It was, actually.
Yeah.
The destruction of Uzur at the hands of Thammaron was a
The
big part of the
destruction of-
Caridian Desert Campaign, which Balford was a large part of, apparently.
Don't forget the destruction of Thammaron at the hands of Uzur.
Yes, additionally that. But this warned Ulek that the Zamorakians were trying to destroy these cities. However, Azanadra was a large part of destroying the remnants of Thammaron's army, and Kriath, a large number of Zamorakians, they began to lay siege to Ulek, led by Balfrog. And while Ulek was prepared, and they battled, Ulek
Many
was
people
defeated.
evacuated.
Yes.
Ulek was, in the end, destroyed.
Yeah, and many of its inhabitants fled to Sophonem through a series of underground tunnels.
And Menethos.
Indeed.
You've also got Stan. I can't pronounce this.
Stanon Karlak.
Karlak. His examine test is Destroyer of 1,000 Planes, which it gives you backstory to the idea that the God Wars were not only waged on Gilnor, but also throughout the universe.
Yep.
Or just in the air.
Indeed. An additional discussion is Zakolm Grinch. He has the name Scourge of Light, which was given to him by Zamorak himself, apparently, and he has powers over ice. He was given that title for being a prominent soldier.
Yes.
And he attacks by throwing large ice circles.
And also, I think it's because of some very impressive campaigns against Ceradonus soldiers, because that's
Definitely.
like the light.
Yeah.
There's
That's what
no
we can
way
get
he
from
wasn't
that.
particularly involved in fighting and battling Ceradonists.
Right. So, next up is General Grador, which we are going to head over to Walter. No, we're going to get to Orange.
Walter Speaks, episode 1.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
That would be a
Yes.
shock, wouldn't it?
One day, one of these episodes, you guys will actually hear Walter speak.
The last episode.
The last ever episode, in like 50
Yeah.
years. Walter's on
No,
his
we'll have
deathbed, and he just croaks out, "This was
Penguins.
all in vain," and then it's just over. And that's the episode.
Yogg-Sothoth saved me.
No, he just croaks out, "I killed a Raxar."
Am I in time for the podcast, he says. Beautiful.
Alright, so we're going over to Orange for General Grador,
Yeah.
and the lore book that goes along with him, which is The Glory of General Grador.
All the glory. So yeah, General Gardor, also known as Bandos to a certain selection of the population. He's our big friendly orc, and probably the first boss that new PVMers would meet when they enter the Godwars dungeon. And there's not really too much about him other than the fact that he was like one of Venos's prized generals, and he really enjoyed his job.
He's also one of the last of his race now.
Yeah, that too. One of
Like, actually one of the last of his race,
Yeah.
not like the ice scenes where there's a whole planet full of them.
yeah, like
There's so few,
Oh,
so
stop,
die,
wait,
except for
guys.
the whole planet.
I don't know why, but it stopped recording. Oh, it's recording.
I am still recording. We're all good.
Yeah, we're going. Sorry about that. Let's continue.
Yeah. He's probably the only one who's really enjoying his time in the dungeon, because he's doing exactly what he knows best and fighting everything he can get.
Which is
He's
up
hitting
things.
things.
Yeah. He's smashing all the things. And yeah, through the lore book we pick up a little bit of his early life and how he got to where he was. So starting off as a young orc and challenging his tribe's chief to a wrestling match and winning that, and then essentially became a mercenary and went out and attracted a large number of goblin followers with the large reserve of gold he found. But eventually that gold started to run out, and he started questioning, like, you know, maybe the big-eyed war god had abandoned him. But that's when he started, like, basically hiring himself out and regaining gold and building up what would have been one of the biggest armies in the land. And yeah, he's featured in The Mighty Fall and ends up as possibly the leader of the Bandosian remnant if you pull a Shiraki and kill Zanuck.
Yes.
But otherwise, he still hangs around in the God Wars dungeon, still trying for the...
He is the hardest quest boss that is currently out there for some, and also the easiest actual boss out there.
Yeah,
Wait, you can consider him a boss?
He is easy. You take less damage in Gwardor than you do on the giant bull. Let's put it that way.
Yes.
Yeah, you take less damage at Gwardor than you do at Rune Dragons.
A rune dragon could probably kill Gwardor. An elite rune dragon could kill like 10 Gwardors.
In any event, General Grador is... He is pretty lore light. Well, we've already discussed a bit of his lore. He was the one who actually instigated the whole battle of the God Sword at the... He created the whole divide between all the factions.
Because he liked to hit things.
yeah,
Yes.
Because he likes
Also,
to.
probably because Bandos instructed him to.
yeah, to prolong the war as long as possible.
Bandos
And
instructed him to hit things.
yeah, is one
Really, Gwar just comes down to, let's hit things.
Yeah. Unfortunately, like we said, he doesn't have as much backstory as the others, and even his book isn't particularly inspiring.
Yeah. Easy.
So now we are going to move on to the last major of the God Wars Dungeon Generals. Commander... no, Kriara.
Kriara.
Yes, and I will be doing this in combination with Fang. And basically Kriara is the one who was charged with carrying around the God Sword in attempts to bring it back to whatever base they were trying to bring it to.
In fact, it's very, very likely that Kriara was one of the main smiths of the God Sword, as we know
Yes.
that AVNTs as a race are particularly good smiths.
Correct. In any case, AVNC metal work here it came under a bit of fire as the AVNTs began to die out. They were chased and harried along by the Zamorakian forces, and eventually, as we said before, they came into the cave. And they did that as they just kept getting ambushed and ambushed and ambushed with Krelsit Sareth. in his lore book, which is Armadel's Assault, I believe it's Armadel talking to Kriara.
We're not actually sure who wrote it. The Examine even just says, a book written in the aftermath of a battle between Armadel and Seerdomen. It's very vague, it's not signed, but it basically gives a wee bit of backstory about what Armadel's been doing in the cave, how he made peace with Ziliana, and how he didn't want to continue to battle on 3 fronts at once. Of course, Zamorakins are still attacking them, and Bandos is still being stupid. But after the fight between Armadel and Seerdomen, hitting things. Corridor smash.
And basically, it just says that this battle has been drawn in for months and months. Kriara, well...
Whoever's writing this got very, very injured.
Yes,
but,
both legs broken, body, arm.
He's noticed something, though. He notices the amulets, and he threw away his own. He burned it, and he believes that they are influencing Kree in some way. He actually says, or she perhaps, it certainly changed you slowly, subtly, naturally. The differences are obvious. Before, you had always ensured that we had a way out. You never led an assault until we were certain of success, and you always showed extreme sadness whenever a precious aviancy was lost. Now, you become hasty and rushed. You have no plan for escape. An entire squadron of aviancy was wiped out in a mission, and you moved on to the next battle plan immediately. When we stealthily approached the waterfall, Ziliana's troops were lying in wait. How could she have anticipated it if not for the amulet? And whoever is writing this is absolutely certain that the amulet is the cause of their tactical plans failing.
Yes.
So, what this person is suggesting, well, Aviancy is suggesting, is that Kree takes the God Sword itself and actually use it as a weapon in battle. Although,
I suspect that the God Wars dungeon froze over before he got the chance to do so.
Yeah,
because otherwise, Ziliana would be very dead. Like, very, very dead.
Yep.
Again.
This also explains why Ziliana drops the Armadil crossbows. Because she captured them as kind of a victory item after kind of winning the battle before they came to peace.
Yes.
So, beyond that, though, Kree's past isn't particularly well known. He doesn't seem to be a particularly important figure on Abina as far as we know. And we know that there's a split in Aviancy between those that were willing and able to battle, and those that deserted, escaped back to Abina, and really had no desire to be involved in these petty god wars on a world that wasn't even theirs. Kree, obviously, is a huge Aviancy. Absolutely massive. And of course...
He's in a different style of the other Aviancy that we've seen.
Yeah.
And of course, he's particularly strong in battle, a strong tactical leader, as evidenced through this journal, and very devout Armadillian, of course, is willing to follow Armadillion.
Yeah, and very honorable, as we found out when we met him in World.
Yeah, he would not fight us unless we really persisted on, we need to go in there.
Yeah, the way he talked in the World Wakes was particularly interesting, He seemed like he didn't want to do these things, but felt it was the only way to succeed in his mission and perhaps save Armadillo.
Yeah.
So, very loyal to the cause. Very intelligent, too. He was really the only one of the 4 that when we encountered them in the World Wakes was even willing to talk to us.
Yes.
Ziliana was all about just must kill Gothics. Trill roared at us and did things. Bandos roared at us and smashed things. Did stupid things. And hit us, yes. But Kriara actually took the time to talk with us. He expressed regret at what he was doing, especially since he'd been free of the amulet, we assume, by the time he was, showing up in the Wakes. And he really seemed to be a generally okay member of the, out of the 4, really quite reasonable. And while we defeated him in battle because he insisted, stand
because he's an Armadillion, that makes him scum. What?
But he... He really is he's a birds of a feather like us.
Nice.
He's a real stand-up guy.
Yeah.
Alright.
He's got a meaty backstory that we can sink our claws into.
Yes. So, I believe that's all the God Wars Dungeon generals. Do you guys have anything else you'd like to say about the God Wars Dungeon?
Yeah. Jagex, please buff them.
Yeah, they
boring.
they do deserve a buff.
I mean, the hard mode was a buff, but because there's just these disgustingly easy versions of them available, yeah, it's not really particularly difficult to get their drops. So as actual,
Alright.
PVM creatures,
They time has not been kind to them, but they do deserve some praise as what they did for PVM and what they did for RuneScape as a whole. So I think that's the end of our little cast here. Let us know what you think about it. We'll be trying to do some more of them.
generally these will be focused on boss lore and the areas around the bosses.
So stuff like Virago, like really lore-heavy bosses. Maybe even the cow fights. Stuff like that. The King Black Dragon, the Queen Black Dragon, stuff like that.
Really, the only one that I think we can discuss in any length is Araxor. Who's basically, look, there's a giant hole that is opened south, Port Phasmatis. Go kill the giant spider thing.
If we somehow manage to get good enough, then we might be able to do raids. But that,
I mean, we can do raids, that's fine.
We can die in raids.
We can die raids, that's fine.
yeah.
But raids is also fairly lore-rich. Got good backstory, and it of course will be expanded on come out to the quest.
Of course. So
That'll probably be the best time that we touch on raids. I imagine the next thing we'll touch on probably QBD, KBD.
it might be Virago actually.
Possibly Virago as well.
Yes.
It's
So thank
one
you
of
guys
those
for
two.
tuning in.
We're
Thank you guys for coming here and talking about the bosses.
for having us.
And this is Seercast signing off. Thanks.